Good evening, you're listening to The Truth Tank and I'm your host, The Tank. If this is your first time listening to The Truth Tank, a big welcome. If you're a repeat listener, welcome back. So this episode is another weekly Tank episode. It's another film review. The film in question is the latest installment in the Marvel franchise, Thunderbolts. I think this is the first or second film of Phase 5 or Phase 15 or whatever the fuck they're up to. I don't really keep track of Marvel films anymore. I like the first few Marvel films and the Avengers. That first, second phase, whatever the fuck it's called. I'm not really the biggest Marvel fan, as you probably know if you listen to this show. I'm more of a casual viewer at this stage. But when I did see the trailer for Thunderbolts, I thought, yeah, this looks pretty good. This looks like it could be fun. It's got a lot of action, a lot of humour, and it looks like Marvel's version of Suicide Squad, which the first Suicide Squad was fucking crap. But James Gunn's Suicide Squad was pretty good. I did like the direction that went in. It was over the top and violent. This episode will also look at a deep philosophical question that's been making the rounds on the internet. 100 men versus one silverback gorilla. Opinions are divided on this. Who would win? Who would lose? Can 100 men overcome such a beast? Or will the silverback tear them apart? There's been many perspectives and takes on this question, so I thought I'd throw my hat in the ring and add my own. But without further ado, let's get into the film review. This is episode 77 of The Truth Tank, and the 6th weekly Tank episode, Thunderbolts review, and 100 men versus one silverback gorilla.
I'm Mandy.
And I'm Avery.
We're the hosts and creators of Thick Thighs and Creepy Vibes.
Join us as we take a deep dive into the macabre and the unexplained.
Listen every Wednesday as we take you on a chilling journey that transports you to all corners of the Great White North.
Let's boot those Sunday scaries while we take a rip into the harrowing tales of the haunted and the supernatural phenomena that defy explanation.
So grab your ketchup chips
And your Caesars and make sure to
creep it real.
So Thunderbolts, where do I begin? Opinions are a little divided on this film. I've seen a lot of reviews where people have been raving about Thunderbolts, calling it the best MCU film since Avengers Endgame and the best film in the new phase of Marvel, whatever that happens to be. I have a vastly different take on Thunderbolts than most people do. I'm calling the film Thunderduds, not to be funny, but you'll see why at the end of the review. Thunderdud starts like many Marvel films do. There's some connection back to a TV show that I haven't watched, or the last 35 movies that sees a character from a film that came out 3-4 years ago. It has some connection to the timeline that we're in at the moment, which happens to be Yelena, played by Florence Pugh, however you say her name. She's doing a job for Elaine from Seinfeld, Julia Louis-Dreyfus' character, Valentina, Allegra, whatever the fuck her name is. She makes her way to a lab to destroy evidence. They're covering up some type of experiment or something like that, or we don't really know. She's just there doing this job. The opening scene was okay. I thought it was going to be a bit more action-packed. I actually thought it was a bit of a rip-off of The Dark Knight with the parachute skyhook scene, and it gets violent pretty quickly. I've found the last batch of Marvel movies to be kind of void of morality. They're focused a lot more on gun violence and shooting, and basically a lack of fucking yes, Jaden. Watching the Eagles game, sorry. I found that the last probably 4 or 5 Marvel movies, I haven't seen them all, but they focus a lot more on gun violence than they do superheroes beating the shit out of each other. Yelena just makes her way into this lab and kneecaps a bunch of guards, and she's having this deep, conflicted moral conundrum. Yet she just shot 10 guys in the leg, giving them permanent injuries. They'll probably have to limp the rest of their lives because of her. Now, they do shoot first, yes, but in previous Marvel movies, like Black Widow's just disarmed people and knocked them out, and this, she just doesn't care. She's going through the bad guys, kneecapping them to get to the objective. Yeah, fair enough. It's just a little bit different from previous Marvel movies that have been more beat 'em up style of action and violence rather than guns. I found there's a lot more SWAT teams and special forces type soldiers in the current Marvel films. It's become more government conspiracy and cover-up than it had in the past, ever since Phil Coulson's not in it anymore, and S.H.I.E.L.D. So, Yelena makes her way into the lab. I have no fucking idea what has happened before this. The shows are not my thing, and I'm not watching another 25 films and 10 TV shows just to understand the opening of this film. As I mentioned, she's having this moral dilemma. She's having trouble dealing with her purpose and her past of bad choices. I'm guessing you have to see the TV shows to get to see the entire backstory. I'm not even sure she is in any of the Marvel shows. I know Valentina is. I don't remember her being this jaded in Black Widow, which is a few years ago now. I did like Black Widow. Her past is coming back to haunt her. She doesn't have a purpose or a direction to go in. She's more or less just a hired gun. And from previous Marvel films, they've done a better job at trying to fill in the backstories if you haven't seen the TV shows. Not all of them do, but they fill you in enough you can roughly pick up where the story left off, even if you haven't seen the TV shows. I mean, Marvel's not exactly the most philosophical films ever made. They're pretty straightforward. And I didn't really feel you got that in this film. It's kind of just dumped you straight into the time period with not a great deal of explanation thrown in. So this opening action scene leads into a dramatic court scene involving Valentina. She is like a delusional version of Amanda Waller. Bucky's back. He's now a senator or something, or a politician. Valentina wants to form a new Avengers to protect America because the OG superheroes are all gone. And I think they probably need to be brought back because I didn't really find it that convincing. Why would you need a new Avengers when the threats aren't really that big? I know it's going to build to something, and that's what this film does very well, is builds to, I'm guessing, Avengers Doomsday, which is coming next year or later this year, whatever it fucking comes out. So in that regard, this film does do a very good job of hyping up future Marvel projects and the eventual new Avengers film and whatever the bad guys happen to be. And from the get-go, I did think this was going to be Marvel's version of the Suicide Squad, which is a little bit of a role reversal. Marvel finally ripping off DC instead of DC trying to rip off Marvel, which it should have done a better job at. And maybe we could have gotten the Ben Affleck Batman movie and maybe another Justice League, another Man of Steel, but oh no, they fucked that golden opportunity up, didn't they? But this film is nothing like Suicide Squad. It's not a great deal like the trailer made it out to be. The trailer makes it out to be this big fun film, but very early on I got the feeling that this wasn't quite the case. But there is a little glimmer of hope. The return of Red Guardian, played by David Harbour. I think he's my favourite character in this. He was my favourite character in Black Widow. He's funny as fuck. He does a really good Russian accent. As a cool reunion with Yelena, she is much different from Black Widow, where she's basically the ass-kicking sister of Black Widow, cousin, I can't fucking remember. Red Guardian is this old world Soviet version of Captain America, who's reminiscing about the old glory days, about saving people, where that was his happiest part of his life, is when he was saving people and being recognised as a hero. Yelena, on the other hand, is not a hero. She can't reminisce about her past the same way Red Guardian, her father, can. Pretty sure he's the father. So this leads to her accepting another job from Valentina. Her mission is to go to this covert mountain facility and destroy more evidence. The government's putting pressure on Valentina and her department for overstepping their bounds and being a bunch of dodgy government cunts, running black ops projects behind the government's back and being very shady while doing it. There's also another moral dilemma with human experimentation and then doing a bunch of dodgy bad shit. So I thought, finally, we're going to get some action. This is going to be the big first opening action scene. Yelena makes her way to this facility out in the middle of the desert, built into a mountain. She's supposed to take out another character that can turn invisible and walk through walls, which leads to the big standoff we've seen in the trailers involving all the reject Marvel anti-heroes all meeting up in one place to assassinate each other. There's a big fight, which is actually pretty clever because they only try to take out the target they were assigned. And they're like, I'm not here for you, I'm here for this person. And the other one's like, well, I'm here for you, yada, yada, yada. Which ends up turning into a Mexican-style standoff. Just before I get too ahead of myself, this episode will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, stop listening. So one returning character that I was actually pleased to see was Taskmaster, aka Antonia, played by Olga Krylenko, however you pronounce her name. But unfortunately, this doesn't last long because she gets shot in the head, and I thought this was one of the most unnecessary deaths because she could have been a key part of the cast, I thought. She could have got killed off at the end of the film. She doesn't even have a line, you see her face, and then she gets shot in the head. So I thought this was going to be a quick shoot-em-up action scene, and they get out of there and realise they've all been played by the same person. Valentina has given them the contracts to all turn up to the mountain facility to take each other out to cover her own ass because the government's onto her, and they're going to shut down her black project that she's been working on in the shadows. This scene is probably the most drawn-out scene in the entire film. It doesn't seem to fucking end, and I'm pretty sure it went on for about half an hour. I thought this would be like a 10-15 minute action sequence. They realise they've been played, then they'll team up in order to take out Valentina. But this turns into like this fucking 40-minute, boring as fuck, let's figure out the situation and try to escape. Now, Wyatt Russell's character, John Walker, is as thick as a brick and not very likeable. He thinks it's just a mistake and they're just all doing their job and the government wouldn't really do this. Ultimately, he's proven wrong, and during the fight, there's this cryo coffin chamber thing that opens, and this random guy in a medical gown shows up called Bob. No one knows who Bob is or why he's there. It's clear that he's obviously of key importance to the story and he's going to play a bigger part. And that was all interesting, but this scene just drags on and on and on and on. And it takes about half an hour for them to figure out they're being played. The incinerator turns on. They're all going to be burned. The one that walks through the wall, she walks through the wall, lets them out. Then they realise they have to use teamwork in order to save their own asses and get out of here. And that's another thing I did like about this film. It does do this who can you trust element very well. They have to team up in order to survive, but they don't trust John Walker. That's around his fucking head. Come on, he's not even in a fucking headlock. Fucking hell, umpire. He is the most untrustworthy person in the group. No one really trusts each other. Yelena's kind of the moral centre of the group, with the invisible girl probably being the other trustworthy element. Bob's a bit of a wild card. We don't really know a hell of a lot about Bob. Bob doesn't remember anything about Bob either. There's a cool scene where they have to walk back to back up this ventilation shaft in order to get out, and John has to take Yelena's staff or something, or a baton in order to get out, which leaves the other ones at risk of falling. He chooses the selfish path in order to save them, which he ultimately does. But the thing this scene does really well is give us a clear indication of who you can and can't trust. Now, John's a bit of a wild card. You don't quite know if you can trust him. The Invisible Woman, Ava Starr, I have no idea what she's from. I can't remember if she was from Black Widow or one of the Avengers or one of the other Marvel movies. I haven't seen a few of them, so she's probably from one of them. So by the time they've worked out what is happening and that they're being played, it's about 30 minutes in this boring fucking facility. And there's a military strike force team outside. Valentina's caught on to what's happened and that things didn't go according to plan. There's a military team outside the facility. They're not supposed to shoot them because she realised that Bob is with them, and Bob was part of some covert experiment team that she was running. He was the only survivor, so he might be of some value to her. There's another fight with the SWAT guys outside. The military guys are called OE, whoever Valentina's group is, the OE task force or the OE fucking whatever the fuck they're called. I don't know. OE troops, I'll call them. So they're ambushed by the OE troops. Bob is going to sacrifice himself in order to save the group. They sneak out of the facility dressed as the army guys and escape in a car. Bob goes up into the sky, he sacrifices himself, and the complete direction of this film fucking changes from here on out. There's a escape through the desert. Red Guardian picks them up because he moonlights as a limo driver, which was very obvious because he has a maroon-coloured limousine, and he's called Red Guardian Limo Service or something. And one of his clients was Valentina and her assistant, where he overhears the plan to kill the reject heroes in the incinerator trap. And he works out one of them is Yelena. Like she's going to have that conversation in an unsecure environment, especially when he doesn't have the privacy screen up, if there was one at all. And how does she not know, with all the resources, who this guy is? Maybe there is something I'm missing from the other Marvel things I haven't seen, but I just thought it was a bit stupid. The desert escape is probably 45 to maybe 55 minutes into the film at this point, roughly. I think it's probably about halfway, maybe. And it still feels like we're in the first act of the film. And this is a gripe I have against films that do this. I hate it when a short 89 or 90 minute film, like Venom 2, is made up of two halves. There's a beginning and an end, whether that be a drawn out beginning and a overly long end of the film, which makes it seem like there is no middle to the movie. In some cases, they do that because that is a way you can tell stories in halves. You do the first act and the second act, or obviously the most traditional one is the first, second, and third act. I like the way Nolan does his films. He does them in sixes, more symmetrical, which doesn't surprise me. Prologue, intro, middle, the in-between, the middle, and the end, and then a epilogue. It's a more complex way to tell a story, but I think it's better, and I just hate it when films tell a story like in halves and there's nothing in the middle. And this film definitely seems like that. There is no middle part to this film. It's a 2.5 hour film made up of two halves. A drawn out intro and start, not a lot in the middle. There's maybe a little bit in the middle, and a very drawn out, tedious ending. In case you can't tell, I'm watching the football while recording. I'm watching West Coast versus Richmond, and it's 35-34. Red Guardian scenes in the limousine were probably some of the best in the film. He was really funny. He's got the top shelf vodka. He's turned his limousine into a bit of a party limo. He's also very embarrassing to Yelena. So this chase is interrupted by the OE guys in hot pursuit, trying to stop the car. They're shooting machine guns at him, 50 caliber, which somehow doesn't kill everybody in the limo. John blocks some of the shots with his shield, and then Bucky comes to the rescue. He blows up the pursuit vehicles, and then proceeds to take out the limousine because he wants to bring the anti-heroes in to custody. And Bucky's only been in a couple of scenes. He's had the scene in the courtroom. There's a funny scene where he's washing his arm in a dishwasher. But that was about it. He has I think 2 appearances in Captain America, Brave New World. And I was kind of hoping that Bucky was going to make a bit more of an appearance in this film and be in it a bit more, and maybe have a costume that didn't look like a generic casual biker outfit. And like I was saying about films that are made up of two halves like Venom, the pacing in this film is fucking horrible. It feels like 2 overly long, drawn-out halves that were just pretty much glued together, and it was a very different film to what I thought I was paying to go see. The trailers made it out like it was this big, fun action spectacle, and it's pretty fucking boring, if I'm honest. Like, there's some parts in it I was starting to doze off. There isn't a lot of action, and the action we do get is spread out. There's a lot of boring back and forth, really meaningless dialogue between these characters. They seem to be pretty slow on the uptake. And when they do figure out what's happening, then they got to fill Bucky into what's happening because he's trying to be Mr. Virtuous and he's trying to take in the anti-heroes to custody to make them answer for their crimes, because I think he's sussed on to what's happening at the facility. Oh, that's a fucking head high. I can't remember if Valentina has something to do with Bucky turning up, but he turns up. Now, Bucky's getting information from Valentina's assistant, who has a bit of a moral come to Jesus moment where she decides to do the right thing and starts to fill Bucky in with what's happening. He's sussed out that Valentina is not what she says she is, and she's a bit dodgy. Fucking excellent goal from the Ruckman. So Bucky's figured out what Valentina's up to. She's planning on using Bob as a weapon to justify her own power to take control of defense and to prevent her from being impeached, because she's at risk of being impeached by someone in the government. She's trying to protect America from threats and wants to create a new Avengers team, but she's the one creating the threat in order to get the unrestricted power to create the answer to the threat, more or less. She's figured out that Bob was the only survivor of this experiment, and he could be potentially very powerful if he can be controlled, and she wants to use him to try to get that control. I thought this storyline was fucking dumb. It was cliche and it was fucking boring. That's the other thing about this film, is it's boring. People have been raving about this film, and that's great. That's their opinion. I don't think I was watching the same film as them, because what I saw was dull, cliche, drawn out, and really boring. There was nothing really new in this film that made me think this was the best Marvel film of Phase 14 or whatever the fuck they're up to. So the anti-heroes come up with this plan to save Bob. Bob is changed into this Sentinel creation of Valentina's, which is, again, dumb and cliche, and it seems like a very cheap Superman ripoff. And this time Marvel does rip off DC. Sentinel has an S logo and a very corny gold outfit. So she gets a team of stylists to come up with a more likeable, generic look for Bob, one that will resonate more with the public. He's got this corny gold and black suit. He's got his hair dyed blonde. And this is where we're filled in with his backstory. And it turns out that Bob is the test subject that survived. He's also survived child abuse and drug addiction, and the darkness that he's experienced could be a very real risk, especially when he has so much power. It could backfire, so the anti-heroes head to New York, to the old Stark Tower, which hasn't been seen in a while, which has been renovated by Valentina and the OE group as their new base of operations. So they think they're going to stop Valentina, but I know it's a bit of a trap. Bob 2.0, or Sentinel, makes his first big appearance. He attacks the group and ultimately proves to be this very powerful, formidable force. He literally turns dark. The cunning Valentina has a kill switch and turns him off, which nothing that happens in this part of the film comes as much as of a surprise. You knew she had how to trick up her sleeve. And this leads into the final battle. So there hasn't really been a lot of action until this point. It's been pretty boring and drawn out, unlike other Marvel movies, where at least you get to the end part of, or the end section of the film, and you're kind of guaranteed a big over-the-top spectacle, and that's what I was waiting for the entire film. And it doesn't come, much to my disappointment and amazement. The trailers made it look like it was a bigger, more action-packed film than it actually was, and what I was expecting, I don't actually know what I was expecting. I was expecting a battle in the city like the first Avengers, but you don't really get it. So Black Bob turns into this demonic Superman character and threatens the whole city. He wreaks havoc and starts shadowing people in the streets. And the scene when the big crane comes crashing down and takes out a couple of helicopters that probably realistically wouldn't be flying that close to buildings anyway. I thought, finally, some action. I can forego some of the boring parts if we finally get some action. And then, no, the film turns into a deep psychological kitchen sink drama. Go figure. I didn't see that one coming. Yelena shadows herself, sacrifices herself, for lack of a better word, where she goes into Bob's mind, where she is later joined by the others. Bob has these psychological powers, and when he touches people, he can see into their memories. You get to see some of Yelena's past, and it's pretty frightening. And John's backstory, which they only really mention at this stage of the film, which leads to the rest of the heroes joining her in Bob's mind. Now, it's unclear if all the people that get turned into black shadows are in the same place. Obviously, it stands to reason that there is probably some connection to everybody he has shadowed. 1-point game, 41-42, nearly half time. At this point in the film, it turns into a different movie again. There was one cool scene in all of this. The memory travel scene was pretty cool, where they go from different memories inside Bob's mind. You do get to see the meth chicken, which I thought was pretty funny. That's probably the funniest part of the film. So I thought I was going to get some action, but instead I was psychoanalyzing the characters. Yelena is in this dream world with the other anti-heroes. Bob is beating the shit out of the team. They're stuck in the lab in Bob's mind because he was a drug addict roaming the streets of Southeast Asia, where he gets recruited into this program. So that's where it all began, which is what Yelena was covering up at the start of the film. So they have this big showdown in Bob's mind. He's beating our heroes. They're all pinned against the wall. Yelena's trying to save him, which she ends up doing, and she saves the day by hugging him, where she is joined by the other characters. So rather than explosions and gunshots and punches and stuff, they save the day by hugging Black Bob, which makes him come back to the light. So this causes him to go back to normal. The black shadow that was taking over the city is now receding. All the people that were shadowed come back to reality, and our heroes save the day. Bob's back to normal, but he doesn't remember what's happened. Valentina sets up the anti-heroes. She lures them into this publicity trap where there's a bunch of news cameras, and she takes credit for the quote-unquote New Avengers, and which is annoying because she is really the bad guy of this film, and she's not really punished. She just takes credit for the New Avengers, and if you've been on social media after the release of this film, the asterisks at the title of Thunderbolts, which I was wondering why that was there, because they have changed the name apparently to the New Avengers, which I think is one of the most corny marketing strategies ever. It's cool in some regards, it's just stupid. Like, fucking call the movie Thunderbolts or call it the New Avengers, whatever. Thunderbolts and New Avengers, there you go. Best of both worlds. She still wants the control of the New Avengers, which leads to the end of the film. The mid-credit scene was pretty funny with Red Guardian on the Wheaties box. But the post-credit scene was interesting. It was probably the most interesting part of the film. Red Guardians come up with an idea to call themselves the Avengers with a Z. They have these funny looking NASCAR suits that he's had made for everybody. And this is where they mentioned Falcon. He doesn't like the New Avengers, and he's got the right to use the name, which is a cool connection back to Brave New World. They're in this base where they pick up a signal from outer space, and big spoiler, it's the Fantastic Four shuttle, which obviously sets up the Fantastic Four in a couple of months, which I could not give two fucks about. I haven't seen the trailer for that film. I will see it. I just, not getting too excited about it. So my final thoughts on the film, I thought it was dull, weird. I was expecting an action-packed anti-hero film that was funny, like the trailer made it out to be, but it was not. Red Guardian was really the only funny part of it. David Harbour was great, as always. Florence was pretty good too. And Louis Pullman was really good. I haven't seen him in a hell of a lot of movies, but yeah, he was not bad. But unfortunately, it wasn't really enough to do much for me. I thought the film was slow. It tried to do something different, which is commendable, but I don't think it worked. It would have, I think, worked better as a TV show, maybe in a different format. But as a big blockbuster peddled as this big Marvel action film that's like Suicide Squad, I don't think it really worked. And the other thing the trailer doesn't mention at all, not from what I can remember anyway, is this film has a huge focus on mental health, which isn't really reflected in the trailer or the poster. I don't go to a Marvel movie to be reminded of mental health. I go there to see Thor, Captain America, and the Hulk beating the shit out of aliens. I want to see Chris Hemsworth's six-pack and Scarlett's tits. I don't want a deep psychoanalysis of mental health problems with anti-hero reject Avengers. Yeah, it was it was an interesting way to take the film. For me, it didn't work. I really just couldn't get into it. It was dull. I was starting to nod off towards the middle of it. And as I mentioned before, the movie has a long start and a long finish and really no middle. Didn't feel like a Marvel film either. It lacked the excitement and fun that Marvel movies usually are. I said it before and I'll say it again. I think Marvel is massively overrated and I think it might be dead. I think they probably should have stopped after Avengers. Yeah, there's been some good films after that. Deadpool, Wolverine being the standout. Doctor Strange 2, average. I didn't bother seeing Black Panther 2 or Miss Marvel 2. What was the other one that came out post? Oh, the Spider-Man, No Way Home, Far From Home, Back to Home. That was pretty good. That was one of the better ones. Not overly hyped for Fantastic Four or Avengers Doomsday. I think it's kind of lame they're bringing Robert Downey Jr. back as the bad guy. It's a cool concept, but he's synonymous with being the face of Marvel and being the hero that saved the day. Now they're going to bring him back in an alternative timeline. Given how many good actors out there, there are tons of actors that could have done that role, that could have played Doctor Doom. I just think it's cool on the one hand. It might be a bit of a cop-out on the other to just bring the hero back. And where does it end? Do you bring Chris Hemsworth back as a bad Thor and Captain America as an alternative bad Captain America, played by Chris Evans? Guardians of the Galaxy 3, yeah, that was probably one of the best post-Endgame Marvel films. So I don't think Marvel is dead. I just think they really need to put a bit more time and care into it. I'm sure there will be some great Marvel films in the future. This one just didn't do anything for me. Like I said, it lacked excitement and fun. I also really felt like I had wasted my money on it, and I don't know if I'd be willing to spend as much on Marvel films in the future, especially when cost of living is expensive and a movie ticket, at least where I go, is like $18. You can get them cheaper on Tuesdays, but it's not always convenient. Yeah, I don't care about Fantastic Four or the new fucking timeline or how this Doomsday shit fits into that, and the default excuse for Marvel films now, as it always has been, is it's going to build to something bigger. It's going to connect to this film and that film. Standalone films should be good, regardless of whether they connect into a bigger part of the universe or not. So yeah, I'm not really overly optimistic for the next phase of Marvel. At the moment, Marvel feels like a cheap knockoff of itself, and it's cashing in on the franchise name rather than, I think, putting out really decent films. All in all, I'd give Thunderduds about a 2 out of 5, 2.5 maybe if I'm generous. It was boring. I nearly nodded off. I thought it was dull, slow, dramatic. The anti-heroes were boring apart from Red Guardian. It tried too hard to be funny and came off very corny, I thought. It was convoluted with a very cliche story. The writing was pretty poor, and I thought the directing was as well. And worst of all, it was very anticlimactic. I was looking forward to it. I really wanted to like this film. I got about halfway through and I'm thinking, this is not going very well. This is not going the way I thought it was going to. And I like being surprised. I don't watch trailers unless I go to the movies now, unless it's something that I really want to see. Like I saw a Predator Badlands trailer a few weeks ago, but it's about the only one I've seen recently, unless it's in the theatre. I really did try hard to like this film. It just didn't do anything for me. When that incinerator scene was really drawn out and it went for that opening part went for about half an hour, I got a sinking feeling that this film was not going to be what the trailers had made it out to be. And by about the halfway point, I pretty much lost all hope of this movie being good. In the end, I actually thought this film was somehow worse than Suicide Squad 1. I've seen Suicide Squad 1 3 times, I think. I've seen the director's cut a couple of times, and it's rewatchable to a point. I don't think I'll watch Thunderbolts again. I have no interest of wasting 2 and a bit hours watching this shit again. And ultimately, it felt like a poorly timed 90-minute film stretched out to 2 and a bit hours, which I think is the worst part. I mean, I could probably watch Suicide Squad again even if it's not that great. I mean, I am a DC fan more than a Marvel fan, so I'm a little bit biased. But I don't think I could stand watching 2 and a bit hours of Thunderbolts again. And that brings us to the end of the film review. While I started to drift off and lose interest in Thunderbolts, I started to do some deep critical thinking. I started to think about that age-old philosophical debate that has been making the rounds on the internet, 100 men versus a silverback gorilla. If that isn't a question for the ages, I don't know what is. I've heard a few different perspectives on this question. It's got people very divided. It's a fucking good question. I don't know where it came from, but I've seen it pop up on the internet. Who would win, a silverback gorilla or 100 men? I think with everything, it depends on who the men are. There's so many variables and what ifs with this question. It would depend on the 100 men. Are we talking about modern day men, 100 out of shape, fat or skinny, soy boy, vegan, no offense to vegans, broccoli headed, socks and Crocs wearing men? Or are we talking about 100 rugby players, 100 UFC fighters, a mixture of athletes, 100 special forces men, a mixture of special forces from around the world? Take 100 of the best special forces soldiers in the world and then get them to fight one silverback, because that's a different fucking outcome. Do you take 100 SEALs or 100 SAS soldiers, all from the same unit, who all speak the same language, who all know the same tactics, who have all been through the same school, who are on the same page as each other? That's also a very different outcome. Do you take 100 of the best UFC fighters, 100 wrestlers, a mixture of the two? Because, you're going to get a different outcome. If you take 100 soft modern men that mind their manners and wear Crocs with Bermuda shorts, who like to go get manscaped together, the silverback wins every day of the fucking week. So let's break down that question. So on average, a silverback gorilla is 20 times stronger than a human. A silverback gorilla can deadlift 1,800 pounds, probably more, which is 816 kilos. So let's take the average silverback. So on average, a gorilla is about 350 kilos. The size of silverback gorillas varies. It also would depend on the type of silverback gorilla, because there's two different types of gorillas. You got mountain gorillas and lowland gorillas. So let's take on average the bigger mountain gorilla. So the average male silverback mountain gorilla is anywhere between 350 to 485 pounds, or 160 kilos to 220 kilos. That's pretty fucking big. They range in different heights too. I've heard the biggest gorilla ever was 6'3", which is fucking huge. And as I've mentioned before, I went to a zoo years ago where there were chimps and they had the bulletproof glass, and I was sitting there having this lovely moment with this chimp. I was putting my hand on the glass, he was doing the same thing, he was copying me. Then after about 5 minutes, he had enough of me and thumped the glass, not even hard, and I could feel the vibration through the glass. I thought, fuck, if the glass wasn't there, I would probably been thrown into the wall. So I can only imagine the power a silverback gorilla would have. So if a gorilla can deadlift 1,800 to 2,000 pounds, which 800 to 900 kilos, that's a hell of a lot of weight. I think if the men were to have a chance, it would depend on the size and weight of the men. So take Navy SEAL. So if you take the most jacked 1% guys on the fucking planet, like the 1% of the 1%, the biggest, fittest, fastest men on planet Earth, I think they might have a chance. But there are going to be some casualties, a lot of them. So say if each of these men was around the 200 to 260 pounds, don't want to be too on the heavy side, because I think the mobility would probably be a lot slower. So, I mean, there are some jacked 300-pound guys, but they're few and far between. So let's say average jacked guys between 200 to 260. In other words, 89 to 120 kilos. So I've come up with this equation in my head while I was watching Thunderbolts. So the average pack weight of a rugby union team, the forward pack, which is the scrum, if you don't know what rugby is, if you're listening in America, rugby has a forward pack. You have the front row, which is made up of props, which are the shorter, heavier, stockier guys, and the fatter guys. They tend not to have much of a neck. They're the guys that link arms and then they lock shoulders and heads with the props on the other side. They make up the front row. They do the pushing, back row, or second row, which when I played rugby, I was a left side second row. So the second row is made up of taller, powerful guys who push the front row. So I would have to get down on one knee, put my head in between the left side prop's thigh, and I have my arm around the other guy. He'd have his arm around my shoulder. Then you could get your neck fucked up, and I did get my neck fucked a few times playing rugby. I remember I got like caught and the pack turned and my neck went one way and my body went the other way. It was not nice because you could feel your vertebrae getting like crushed up against the muscle. Oh, it's fucking horrible. Probably explains why I have so many neck issues at the moment. So anyway, so the front row, you have the call, bind, set, engage. So bind, you locked your arms in really tightly with the next guy. I'd have my hand in between the other dude's leg, grabbing the jersey, as weird as that sounds. They changed the calls from year to year, so it could be bind, set, engage, bind, lock, set, or whatever it was. So the next call, the lock, you'd raise up, so you'd kind of stand up and you'd be on with your legs bent, ready to push. So the front row would be like bent over with their heads together. Second row would be behind, like one knee down, one leg up, ready to push into the front row. And you had to do this in time because the first few games I played, I didn't get the timing right and I ended up pushing the front rower too early. And he's like, no, hold on. No, just settle down. Goes, wait for the call. But you have to be explosive and you have to push really fucking quick as soon as the call goes. And then when the umpire calls engage, then you push. And you felt all that 600 to 800 kilos going all the way through your shoulders and your body. And that's why they make that winded sound in rugby when both teams collide. They're not doing that to be tough. When you first impact in a scrum, all the breath is basically taken out of you through the initial impact because it's that fucking heavy. So the point I'm trying to make is New Zealand All Blacks have one of the heaviest packs in all of rugby. I think them and the South African Springboks. I think the New Zealand All Blacks pack weight is about 915 kilos. The Australian Wallabies is about 875 or something. It also depends on the weight of the guys. So the point I'm making is one gorilla could pretty much lift the entire pack of the Wallabies or the All Blacks by itself. And that's made up of about 10 men. So you have 3 front rowers, I think 3 back rowers, plus the 2 guys on the back of the pack and the number 8, number 10, who feeds the ball into the pack. And when the ball's kicked out, he gets it and passes it down the line. So you've got 6, 7, 8. You've got about 10 men in a pack. So let's set the scenario. So you have one silverback and you have 100 guys in front of him or 100 guys in a circle. So those first 10 guys approach. Yeah, they could all just stack on the gorilla and try to overpower it, but I think you take a lot of losses because gorillas get very aggressive if they're threatened. And if it grabs someone, then that person turns into a corpse pretty quickly, which gets turned into a human corpse bat and is used to beat other people to death or thrown. So I say 10 people, the first 10 people are killed instantly. That gorilla would rip them apart limb from limb. The next 10 guys, so that next rugby scrum goes in, they're also killed because gorillas don't have the same muscle structure as humans, obviously. They have that primordial strength. They have bigger, thicker muscles that don't get worn out as quickly as humans. Humans are evolutionarily pretty fucking weak when you compare our nearest ancestors. A chimp is like 6 times stronger than a human. Think of the damage one chimp can do, and it's like half the size of a man. They can rip your arm off, they rip people's faces off. So you take something that is 20 times stronger than a human, and even if they all do stacks on at the start, I think that gorilla gets the better of 10 to 20 guys pretty quickly just by the sheer weight and power. And who knows how strong a pissed off gorilla is. And as soon as he has one opening, he's going to exploit that. And they can also move and they can fucking jump too. If a gorilla jumps, so say 100 guys run at him all at the same time or stacks on, and he puffs his chest up and starts beating it, and he runs at him and jumps, 10 to 15 guys get knocked over like bowling skittles instantly. The guys that hit the ground that have the weight of the gorilla on them are all crushed to death. He picks up someone, starts swinging them around, takes out another 3 or 4 guys. Now he's got 2 human corpse bats in each hand, and he's whacking guys that come running at him left, right, and center. And we are also assuming that the gorilla's are unarmed and the humans are unarmed. There's no weapons involved. This is a straight muscle versus muscle, brain versus brain. The decisive victory might come down to who's smarter. I think humans are obviously smarter than gorillas. Are the humans going to be smart enough to outsmart the gorilla given the circumstances, the fear, the adrenaline? You've just seen 10 guys pretty much ripped apart instantly. Not to mention gorillas have fucking big canines, and they have a pretty severe bite force, so they could fuck you up if they bit your neck. They'd be ripping fucking heads off, biting hands off, punching holes through people like fucking the start of Terminator 1. I heard a story of a African poacher who, I think he hunted gorillas. He lives in America now. I heard this on Sasquatch Chronicles, I think, ages and ages ago, and the locals were scared of gorillas because they hunt hunters or something. They're not as passive as we like to think in the Western world, so he was up in the mountains hunting. He had an AK, everything went silent, and a silverback gorilla burst through the bushes, ripped the gun off of him, broke the gun in half pretty much instantly. It swiped him across the belly with like an open palm. It knocked him over, he got up and he starts running down the hill. He felt cold and looked down and all his guts were hanging out. If that story is true and a gorilla can pretty much disembowel a man with blunt force, imagine what that could do swinging at you running. We've seen those videos on Facebook where the gorillas in Rwanda pick up tourists and drag them off, and it's like they're dragging a doll behind them and they're just fucking with the tourists. So let's just say these are 100 guys. Let's break them into multiples of 20. So 20 times 5 is 100. So you have 100 men, break them down into 5 groups of 20. I say at least 60 men are violently killed in the first few minutes from the sheer ferocity and power of the gorilla. Let's not forget too, muscles probably don't get as tired as quickly as humans. From what I've heard, the gorillas can bench press and like over a ton, leg press like 2 tons or something like that. Like they can push some stupid fucking weight. Humans like to think they're strong because their muscles look bigger, but from what I understand, the muscle fibers aren't as dense or as powerful. They don't carry as much oxygen. And even, I think, bodybuilders, would be too slow to do anything against the gorilla. They might look all big and puffy, but they're slow as shit. I think same goes for strongmen. The cardio isn't there compared to a gorilla. A gorilla is made like that by nature, where as much as a lot of strongmen and bodybuilders like to say they're natural, I don't think any of them are. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that might have been true. But very rarely does anyone who makes a living off of bodybuilding, strongman, any of those physical sports or aesthetic sports, very few of them are 100% natural. There's no way you look like that all year round and without some type of chemical assistance, where a gorilla has been selected by nature to be that big and strong and fast and powerful. So back to the equation. So the equation I came up with, 60 men die, leaving the 41% guys to make their move and overpower the gorilla. Now, at this stage, I'd hope the gorilla would be worn down or out of breath enough from killing the other 60. And this probably sounds really weird saying this as well. This is all hypothetical, of course. So they play stacks on, they surround the gorilla, they all jump on top of him when he's tired after he's just brutally torn apart their 60 comrades. You try to get it in a headlock, but yeah, even then, I think those muscles are way too thick for a human to do much. And then, how do 10 guys all put the one gorilla in a headlock at the same time? So maybe those 40 guys overpower it. Maybe they grab its legs and arms and try to all pin it when it's tired and choke it to death, or body slam it to death, or try to break its neck. But wildlife, anything that's in nature, it's just a different level of strength than what we think of as humans. I think the brains of humans might be the defining factor. If they can somehow outsmart it and pin it down long enough where they can, pick up a mangled corpse of their friend and suffocate it or something. I don't know, this is getting real fucking dark. In short, I think it is possible that humans could kill a silverback gorilla, but you'd have to have the fucking 1% of the 1%. Navy SEALs or Special Forces guys, yes. 100 regular men, silverback wins every day. A mixture of rugby players, UFC fighters, NFL players, yeah, I think could overpower it. But I think they'd all have to be drug tested before, so they're all on a level playing field. Because if one guy has steroids, and give the gorilla steroids and see how that turns out. Yeah, there's another question. 100 men versus one steroid-fueled gorilla, or one normal silverback gorilla versus chemically enhanced humans. But that's not really fair. I think the defining factor that might give the gorilla the victory is if he gets 2 human corpse bats and starts swinging them around, because the damage done by the force of a dead 250-pound human being swung into the head of somebody else, that's an instant kill if he got hit. Even if the gorilla hits you with its hand or throws someone else at you, that's getting hit in the head with over 100 kilos, and that's basically lights out. But I think the right 100 guys might just get the jump on the silverback. But if it's 100 normal guys, or 100 weekend warriors, or 100... I even think 100 athletes would lack the killer instinct necessary for humans to win. So I think 100 humans only wins if they're military personnel, and I think that's the 1% of special forces globally. I think they could do it. They have to be killers. Otherwise, I think the primeval strength and ferocity of Mother Nature wins. But I don't know, what do you think? Man or gorilla? 100 men or one silverback? Who do you think wins?
G'day. Don't skip. Let me interrupt the podcast that you're currently listening to with some blatant self-promotion. What do you get when you mix 2 Aussie mates, a splash of booze, well, more than a splash, and some microphones? You get Cheers Big Ears, hosted by myself, the Chad, and my mate, Matt, and sometimes, but more often than not now, my missus, Bobby. It's a podcast of adult beverages and not-so-adult conversation. It's not serious, far from it. Well, except for that one episode, but that was just that one. We're available wherever you get your podcast fix. Cheers, Big Ears.
And that brings us to the end of the show. It's a different show, a film review and a hypothetical situation. A big thank you to everyone who listened to the end. If you'd like to support True Tank, there's a couple of things you can do. Head on over to the Facebook and Instagram page, give them a follow and a like. You can download and listen to your favourite episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Castbox, YouTube, Audible, Amazon, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you get your podcasts from. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell anyone you think might like the show. Help spread it around and get the word out there. If you'd like to help raise the Truth Tank standing in the podcasting ranks, you can leave a 5-star rating and review. Every review helps the show get found by new listeners and would be much appreciated by yours truly. Liar Communism Prologue is out now. Definitely give that a listen and share that around. It'd mean a lot if you could take the time to listen to Live Communism. I've put a lot of work into it, so I'd appreciate as many listens as I could get. And that brings us to the end of the show. I'll be back in the next week or two with a brand new episode, but until then, I'm a Tank. This is the truth. Truth to tell.